Welcome back, everybody. This is Turner Talk with Deputy Robert Curvin, and I am Robert Curvin. This is episode 3, coming to you right here from Centerville, South Dakota. I appreciate you all tuning in again. We have a big topic today: domestic violence. What it is, what constitutes its domestic violence, the resources that help victims or survivors, as I call them, and what role does law enforcement play. Then we'll jump into 4 community questions, and that'll be the show. Before we begin, I need to provide a formal disclaimer. Any questions, stories, or experience submitted for this podcast are treated as strictly anonymous. I do not collect names, personal identifiers, or any information that could reasonably be used to identify an individual. Nothing shared here will ever be disclosed in a manner that could be traced back to you. This platform is intended solely for general discussion, education, and transparency. Additionally, I am not an attorney, and nothing discussed on this podcast should be interpreted as legal advice. All community and comments and everything related to law enforcement is based off my personal experience, information available through public record. For situations requiring legal guidance or interpretation of the law, listeners should consult a licensed attorney or qualified legal professional. With that being said, let's jump into segment 1. What is domestic violence under South Dakota law? So I'll break down what domestic violence actually is. Not the rumors, not the assumptions, but the real definition straight out of South Dakota codified law. Under South Dakota Codified Law 2510.1, domestic abuse includes 3 things: physical harm, attempts to cause physical harm, and the infliction of fear of imminent physical harm. That last part is huge because it means that it's not just bruises or broken bones, it's fear, it's threats, it's intimidation. It's someone controlling your movements, your money, your communication, your sense of safety. Domestic violence can be physical, emotional, psychological, financial, or even technological. It's a pattern of power and control, and it doesn't always look like what people expect. Sometimes it's loud and explosive. Sometimes it's quiet and manipulative. But the impact is real either way. And here's the part I always emphasize: you don't have to wait till you're physically hurt for the law to recognize what's happening. Fear of imminent harm is enough under South Dakota codified law. The law is written to protect people before things escalate, you guys. So, segment 2, resources. Because domestic violence is not just a legal issue, it's a human issue, and survivors deserve support, not judgment. South Dakota, all across South Dakota, we have shelters, advocacy centers, crisis lines, counseling services, and legal assistance. These organizations help with safety planning, emergency housing, court assistance, and long-term support. They're confidential. These people are trained, and they're designed to protect survivors, not expose them. One of the most important tools in this whole process is a protection order. And again, you don't need to be physically harmed to qualify for a protection order. If someone is threatening you or causing you fear of imminent harm, you can petition the court for protection. Advocates can walk survivors through the process step by step. They'll help with paperwork, hearings, safety planning. They're the bridge between crisis and stability. And I always use the word survivor, as you've heard, because that's what these individuals are. They're navigating trauma, danger, and the incredibly difficult decisions, because they do have to make decisions on if they're going to go through with the protection order. It's a fear tactic to talk somebody out of getting one. But there's also that comfortability of being with somebody for so many years. You have kids. You don't know what you're going to do. You don't know the steps. It's a difficult situation, and difficult decisions have to be made. And they deserve our respect, dignity, and support. Now, Turner County doesn't have its own domestic violence shelter, and that's normal for rural counties, but it is fully covered by several regional shelters. These organizations routinely assist survivors from Centerville, Parker, Marion, Viborg, Irene, Hurley, and Davis, and all the other surrounding counties around our great county. The first one I'm going to mention is Children's Home Shelter for Family Safety, formerly known as Children's Inn in Sioux Falls. They're the closest and most commonly used domestic violence shelter for Turner County. It's a 24/7 emergency service shelter. They have a crisis intervention. They do protection order assistance. They have advocacy and safety planning, and they do child-specific services. Their phone number is 605-338-4880. Again, if you need help or you just want to talk to somebody that's not law enforcement, again, that number is 605-338-4880. The next one comes Waypost. They're formerly known as River City Domestic Violence Shelter or Center in Yankton. They're a strong regional service for survivors in the South region of Turner County. They provide advocacy, safety planning, shelter placement, and crisis response. Again, if you want to talk to them, not talk to law enforcement right away, but you want to get at least a safety plan going, their phone number is 605-665-1448. Again, that's 605-665-1448. Again, they assist Turner County residents who may be closer to Yankton or prefer a smaller community setting. Safety Place of Eastern South Dakota and Mitchell is our next shelter. They're another established domestic violence program that accepts Turner County residents. They provide emergency shelter, counseling, legal advocacy, and crisis intervention. And again, if you are in the northwest part of Turner County, this is most commonly used for you guys. Their phone number is 605-996-4440. Again, that's 605-996-4440. Okay, so finally, let's talk about the role law enforcement plays. Law enforcement is often the first point of contact. Our job is to respond, investigate, document, and protect. We will separate parties, we'll assess the danger, gather statements, and determine whether a crime has occurred. When probable cause exists, especially in cases involving assault, strangulation, stalking, or threats, we are supposed to take action. We also connect survivors with advocates. We explain the protection order process, and we help them understand what happens next. But here's the truth: law enforcement can't solve domestic violence alone. We can't intervene. We can intervene, enforce the law, and protect people in the moment. But long-term safety comes from a combination of legal action, advocacy, community awareness, and survivor empowerment. And that last one's super important because as law enforcement, we see it. We see the survivor go back to the abuser several times. It's frustrating on our end because we don't want to see that person get hurt. We don't like seeing it. We don't want to see them end up dead. So that is, if you hear the frustration in our voices on these calls, Most of that is coming from that. It's not the fact that you're calling us again because we love that you did call us. It's the frustration that you went back to him after the last time we talked to you and we arrested him. We got you the paperwork. We started the process and then you backed down from it. But that's because you thought you had no power. Your power exists. You are allowed to feel safe and not be hurt. Domestic violence is not a private issue. It's a community issue. And the more we understand what the law actually says, the better we can support the people living through domestic violence. If you're listening today and you're in a situation that feels unsafe, know that South Dakota law recognizes your fear. There are people who will help and want to help. And you don't have to wait to be physically harmed to get the support. You're not alone and you're not powerless. Now, I was lucky enough to hear a phone call between someone I trained and a survivor she helped after a gruesome domestic assault on her by her husband. She had texted the deputy, "I finally did it." While I was on the phone with that deputy, the deputy thought the worst of all, the worst at first, and then called that survivor. And the survivor told the deputy that it was her support and her encouragement and her story to get a protection order for her and her children. She felt empowered, but scared still, but wanted the deputy to know how impactful she was to her and her taking that step. So it's stories like that where that is where it's coming from. We can only give you so much. Those steps, we can't take them for you, but we can take them with you. So we're going to take a short break here while I get something to drink, and then we're going to hop into our community questions. So we'll be back shortly. All right, welcome back. We're jumping right into the community questions. This one's going to segue from what we were just talking about in the first three segments, domestic violence. This is kind of where that topic jumped off from. So I'll go right into it here. I have a customer that's got a domestic violence situation going on, and I just wanted your advice because it sounds like Turner County Sheriff's Office has said as long as he doesn't physically put hands on her, it's not a domestic. Okay, as you guys heard earlier, that's not true. And honestly, it's dangerous to tell somebody that. Someone recently told me that local agency is saying as long as he doesn't put hands on her, it's not domestic. It's dangerous. And that's not what the South Dakota law says. Not even close. Again, I'm going to say what the law says. South Dakota Codified Law 2510-1, domestic abuse is defined as physical harm, attempts to cause physical harm, or inflicting fear of imminent physical harm. The last part matters again because fear is real. Credible fear caused by someone's actions is domestic abuse under South Dakota law. You do not need bruises. You do not need physical contact. You do need to wait until someone puts their hands on you before the law recognizes what's happening. Threats, intimidation, showing up, uninvited stalking, harassment, if it creates fear of imminent harm and the relationship qualifies, now that is a big part too, it has to qualify under South Dakota file law, which in a domestic situation, that's husband, spouse, significant relationship, meaning a sexual relationship for at least 6 months. Children are, you have children together, or they're your children or your spouse's children. Okay. That's exactly why victims can't get protection orders, or even when no physical assault has occurred. The law is written the way on purpose. It's written that way on purpose. It's written that way on purpose. Because waiting for physical injury is how people seriously get hurt or killed. So if you're listening and you're in a situation where someone is threatening you, scaring you, or making you feel unsafe, understand this. South Dakota law already recognizes that it's as domestic abuse. You have options. You can report it. You can seek protection orders. You can get help before it escalates. And again, if that deputy who told you that is listening, you need to do better. You need to do better. Don't just spout off crap off the top of your dome when you don't know. You need to do better. All right. There was more to that question because there was also a threat made by that deputy to that person. They were told if they reported anything, they would be charged with false reporting. You can't do that. You have to prove false reporting. And if you can't prove that, then how can you charge it? So, again, that one gets me a little fired up. Again, like we just talked about domestic violence. And when in the community I live in, the county sheriff's office that governs this community, in its law enforcement capacity at least, when you don't know the laws because you didn't go to the police academy, you'd never been to a actual domestic call in your career, in your very, very, very short career, it puts people's lives in danger. And I don't know. It's not good. So we're gonna take a short break real quick here. All right, I'll be right back, you guys. All right, we're gonna go back into community questions here. We're gonna go in the second one here. Just jump right into it again. If my son, who has been dropped from my vehicle insurance policy due to driving under the influence and takes my vehicle without permission, is that a stolen vehicle? I was told by the Turnham County Sheriff's Office that my son could drive it because he lives with me, and it's assumed that he's allowed to drive my vehicle, although I have my insurance paperwork that states he's not allowed to drive it. Is this true? So, this involves South Dakota law and some bad advice received by the listeners. The question again, if my son has been dropped from my insurance for DUI that takes my vehicle without permission as a stolen vehicle, Turner County told me he can drive it because he lives with me and it's assumed that he's allowed to drive my vehicle. So that's not how South Dakota law works. Here's what the law actually says. I'm going to read the South Dakota Codified Law 2238-1. Theft occurs when a person takes or exercises control over property without permission and with the intent to deprive the owner of it. There is no exception in this statute that says family members who live with you are automatically allowed to use your vehicle. Permission matters. Intent matters. Residency does not override either one. If you tell someone, even your adult child, you're not allowed to drive my vehicle, and they take it anyway, that's unauthorized control of property. In plain language, if you don't give them permission, it's not their vehicle to take. Now, the insurance is a separate issue. Insurance paperwork stating he is not allowed to drive your vehicle does not determine criminal law, but it does reinforce your position that he does not have permission. And if he's been removed due to DUI, that's pretty clear indicator of why you revoked your permission. So let's be clear. South Dakota codified law does not assume that someone who lives with you automatically has permission to drive your vehicle. That's not in South Dakota codified law. And it's not supported by case law or common practice. If your son takes your vehicle without permission, it can absolutely be treated as a stolen vehicle, depending on the circumstance and intent. And if you're ever told, well, he lives with you, so it's assumed he can drive it, understand that that is not grounded in South Dakota statute. Permission is not assumed. Permission has to be given. And I know I'm saying that over and over again, but it's the truth. Permission has to be given. This is one of those situations where misinformation can lead to real problems. Know your rights, know what the law actually says, and don't let someone talk to you out of don't let somebody talk you out of reporting something that clearly meets the definition of a crime. So let's go to the next question. Question 3 for today. What's the law on law enforcement speeding? Do they need to have their lights and sirens on when doing so? So this one is one of those topics where people think they know the rule, but South Dakota law is a little more nuanced than rumor mill. So here's the deal. Under South Dakota Codified Law 3231-3, emergency vehicles, this includes law enforcement, are all allowed to exceed the posted speed limit when they are responding to an emergency call. But there's a catch. The statute says that they must use audible and visual signals, meaning lights and sirens, unless doing so would create a greater hazard or interfere with the ability to safely perform their duties. So, yes, the general rule, if an officer is speeding because they're responding to a call, emergency lights and sirens are required. But here's the part what most people don't know. South Dakota also recognizes that not every situation is best handled with lights and sirens blasting. Think about a domestic situation, like we just talked about earlier in this episode. Officers responding to a domestic situation, we don't want lights and sirens going off. That may, if the person takes off, if anything could happen because they know that we're coming. So it's not always the best situation for us to have lights and sirens. If It could be an armed suspect, a burglary in progress where an officer doesn't want to tip off the suspect in those situations. Running silent, no lights, no sirens may actually be safer for everyone involved. Because if law enforcement was called or triggered or whatever, we don't, and we're going to a situation where we know it's a silent, unarmed trick, I'm not going to have my lights and sirens blaring. I'm not. Because it could be an ambush on my life. It could be waiting until we get there and then they start taking lives. So if we are able to show up without all of that just to keep everybody else safe, that's what we're going to do. The law gives officers discretion. Now, here's what the law does not allow. It does not give officers a blanket permission to just speed. Just because they're law enforcement, if they're not responding to an emergency, they're held to the same traffic laws as everyone. No lights, no sirens, no emergency service, no exception. You can't speed just because you're a cop. You can't do it. It's in the law. So when I hear I've heard this from many people, the current sheriff speeds around. Yeah, he probably does. And I know for a fact he's not. I don't know for a fact. I'm sorry, I can't say that. But if he's speeding around, he could be going to an emergency call. We don't know. That is not, we can't assume that he's going to that. But you know what? You can find out. You can find out on those dates and times, and if you got him speeding, like you seen him speeding, just going through towns or whatever, you can find out whether or not he was, in fact, going to an emergency call. If he's not, he's held to the same standards as everyone else in this county. So to put it plainly, law enforcement can speed, but only when responding to an emergency and normally with lights and sirens. They can deviate from that only when using lights and sirens will make the situation more dangerous. It's not a free pass to speed. It's a controlled exception. And that's straight out of South Dakota codified law, not rumor, not my opinion, not my cousin Sid. It's actually the law. So in segment 4 here, or the fourth community question, can a first responder drink alcohol on duty, whether they're a volunteer or full-time? No, they cannot. Absolutely not. And South Dakota law backs that up clearly. Under South Dakota Codified Law 5-23-1, public employees, which includes law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and even volunteers acting in official capacity, are prohibited from being intoxicated while performing their duties. And intoxicated does not just mean falling down drunk. It means under the influence of alcohol or drugs to any degree that affects performance or judgment. On top of that, South Dakota Codified Law 32-12-65 makes it illegal for anyone operating an emergency vehicle to do so while under the influence. So even one beer, as I've heard the policy in Union County, so even one beer, just a sip, even I'm not drunk, if they're on duty responding to calls or operating emergency equipment, it's prohibited. Now, here's where people get confused. Volunteer firefighters and volunteer EMTs, which are what make up a lot of our emergency services here in Turner County. Sometimes they think the rules are a little looser because they're on call instead of sitting in a station or already on duty. But it's illegal. But legally, when they're on duty, means they are available to respond. They are held to the same standard as a full-time responder. If you're on call, you're expected to be sober enough to respond safely. If you're drinking, you're not on duty, period. And for law enforcement, it's even stricter. Departments have policies that go beyond South Dakota codified law. I'm not 100% sure what Turner County's policy is, but they typically say no alcohol consumption within a certain number of hours before your shift and absolutely none during your shift, even at community events or informal gatherings. So let's put it plainly. South Dakota codified law does not allow first responders, volunteers, or full-time to consume alcohol while on duty. Not socially, not casually, not just one, not I'm off the clock but still in uniform. If you're responsible for public safety, you're responsible for being sober. And honestly, that's how it should be. When people call 911, they deserve someone who's sharp, focused, and ready, not someone who's halfway through a beer. That's the law, and that's the expectation. All right, so that's going to conclude episode 3. Before I leave, I want to provide my formal disclaimer. Any questions, stories, experience submitted for this podcast are treated strictly as anonymous. I do not collect names, personal identifiers, or information that could reasonably be used to identify an individual. Nothing shared here will ever be disclosed in a manner that could be traced back to you. This platform is intended solely for general discussion, education, and transparency. Additionally, I'm not an attorney, and nothing discussed on this podcast should be interpreted as legal advice. All commentary related to law enforcement is based on my professional experience and information available through public record. For any situations requiring legal guidance or interpretation of the law, listeners should consult a licensed attorney or qualified legal professional. That being said, stay safe, stay smart, stay informed. If you got questions, topics you want covered, or something you want clarified, send them my way. This podcast is about keeping our community informed and grounded. This has been Turner Talk with Deputy Robert Curvin. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Again, to my brothers and sisters in blue, we're not better because we wear the badge. We have to be better because we wear the badge. Again, thank you. Have a great day.
Turn talk with Deputy Robert Curvin. Turn talk with Deputy Robert Curvin. Turn talk with Deputy Robert Curvin. Turn talk with Deputy Robert Curvin.